a war film that we are looking forward to talking about. And the movie is Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. So make sure that when you search for it, you search for Guy Ritchie's name in front of it. And it's a war film, Thomas, but it's something that really feels a little different from what I typically come to expect from Guy Ritchie. Now, there's definitely his fingerprints on this. His stamp is there. But this really feels like a war epic type film that you might see, honestly, during award season.
Yeah. As the credits were rolling, I turned to you and said, this movie was a lot different than I thought it would be, and it was even better than I thought it would be as well. It is a war film, but it's very procedural and methodical. It's not one of those movies with another action set piece every 15 minutes just because. It takes time to build up the drama and the tension and the pathos of these characters, and it clearly gives context for where we are within the situational conflicts. And we're never questioning, what the objective is or why the characters are making the decisions that they are. And the military combat tactics that we see put on screen are very systematic and look to be very well researched. Like, I myself can't say for certain how realistic they are, but they at least did a really good job fooling me into believing that this is how real soldiers in the military would approach these circumstances. And I'm pretty confident in saying that Guy Ritchie definitely did his research. A film a few years ago that you interviewed the director, Rod Lurie, and I know you've kind of gotten to know Rod over the years, The Outpost. Yes. There were definitely aspects of this just in terms of how, tactile everything was that reminded me of The Outpost.
Yeah, this had that Outpost meets 12 Strong vibe to it. I throw in a little bit of Lone Survivor as well. But it is a film that also stood on its own. It does take place in Afghanistan, so it's during it's during that type of war and also time period over the last 20 plus years. People starring in this, you've got Jake Gyllenhaal. Got to say it that way. Some people call him Gyllenhaal, and that's fine as well, especially if you're here in America. He stars as Master Sergeant John Kinley, and Salim stars as the interpreter. And what I loved about that is he wasn't someone who said, "I'm just going to translate your language." His character interpreted not just the language, but also how people said things, how people interacted and reacted, and also the situations that were going on. And there were many times that his character intentionally said, "Hey, to anyone he was involved in, let's step back and think about this a little bit. Let's consider where we are and what is going on." And I thought the acting was really solid across the board. Johnny Lee Miller also stars in this as Colonel Vokes, and he's got a limited role. But Johnny Lee Miller, an interesting tie-in, he played Sherlock Holmes in the TV series Elementary, and he was also Eli Stone. But there is a Sherlock Holmes connection because Guy Ritchie also did the Sherlock Holmes films.
With Robert Downey Jr., of course.
Yes.
If they had like a multiverse convergence of all the Sherlock Holmes, I'm sure that Robert Downey Jr. would meet up with this Sherlock.
but there was, from a cast standpoint, it was really kind of a limited cast. They had a kind of a larger supporting cast, but those lead cast, it was really, for the most part, it was Gyllenhaal and Salim.
Yeah, exactly. And the story is based on situations that are rooted in reality, but it's not based on a true story itself. And these characters aren't modeled after specific real people, but they are built around the general idea of people who have existed in real predicaments like this and who did have these jobs as interpreters. And kind of at the close of the film, it gives a bit of a modern day update on, where some of these interpreters are, or not specifically where they are, but like generally where they are in life and some of the things that are still happening with them.
Yeah, Thomas, right now in Afghanistan, as soon as those who were really trying to help Afghanistan try to find a democratic lifestyle, when they pulled back and they left, then the Taliban took over almost immediately, and so this does look at kind of in that post-credit scene, or not post-credit scene, but as before the credits roll, it lets you know that, hey, there are many of these interpreters who are still in danger, whose lives are still on the line, not just their lives, but the lives of their family members, and so many are in hiding because the Taliban's after them for helping to be interpreters and helping to try to find, really, Afghanistan to find a life for their people that provides more freedoms and more opportunities.
Absolutely, and the narrative structure for this film is assembled into three distinct acts, but the way this second act ends kind of made me stop and reassess my preconceived notions of where the story was going. I even briefly checked the time on my phone, not because I was ready for the movie to hurry up and finish, but because I was checking to see if my internal clock was still as accurate as I thought it was. You know, I was like, is there still an hour left in the movie? And there was. We find ourselves at the end of the second act, and in regard to the characters' journeys, it feels like that would be the ultimate conclusion for a more traditionally structured film. But for this film, it is truly only half of the arc of these two main characters, and the characters of Dar Salim and Jake Gyllenhaal. Their arcs are intertwined and like fundamentally wrapped around each other, and it's a really beautiful but haunting portrait of sacrifice and brotherhood that's just intrinsically connected between the two of them.
Yeah, it's also a film that speaks, you talk about the brotherhood, sacrifice, but it also speaks to relationships forged within unique situations. And many times when you are in crisis situations, those relationships that are there, that are experiencing the same types of things as you find that bond even tighter, and it's almost a bond of family. And there are times that Gyllenhaal's character, he has a hard time separating what happened once he kind of comes back home. And we're not going to give a whole lot away. If you watch the trailer, you'll know that he is trying to track down this interpreter who ultimately saved his life. And it's a journey. You just mentioned the three-act structure. It's definitely there, but it's also a journey for providing that promise, that covenant that was made between Gyllenhaal and Salim's character as well, because there was a promise that was made, and he wants to do everything he can to make that happen. And I loved that, and I thought that it presented that just in a beautiful way. As you mentioned, I was truly impressed with this film, and there were a few of those kind of wow moments. The action set pieces were solid, as you would expect. There was also a situation where Gyllenhaal's character was really going through this kind of mind torture, a self-induced mind torture, where he just couldn't come to terms with the reality that he was currently in. And there was maybe a 2.5 minute sequence there that was really fascinating to watch. And as a viewer, I felt that I understood and was a part of that torture that he was going through.
Yeah, it's all these fragments of his memories coming back to him. He basically has this gap of however many weeks it was where he can't remember anything, but then in the ensuing weeks, they're coming back in small little pieces, and he's putting together the puzzle. And the way that is visualized in the film is a really, really fascinating look at how we perceive memories and how we think back to monumental events in our lives that have transformed us in a way. And in terms of other technical aspects of the films, I do want to mention the cinematography by Ed Wilde. It's pretty subtle most of the time, but it doesn't really call attention to itself, and I think that was the most effective approach, visually and thematically. A lot of the camera work is handheld and gives you this subjective look at the action that's playing out, and there are also these times where these slow, gradual zoom-ins on the characters' faces as they're delivering monologues. and then occasionally you have a sneaky one or long take sequence, but you don't even realize you're in a oneer until about a minute or two has passed, and it's just like it's disguised because it just feels so natural and so organic. And I think sometimes those are the most effective uses of long takes like that.
Agreed. It truly does take you into the action. The score was fascinating as well for me. I truly loved that. The sound design was solid. It is a film that I will go back and revisit. It is rated R for language and war violence, but it's not over the top and not gratuitous from the standpoint of the violence that you see. They could have actually gone a step further, and it would have still felt realistic. But for me, this really worked. It's a film I'm going back to, Thomas.
Yeah, absolutely. And Guy Ritchie, he continues to be on a hot streak. I was a big fan of Operation Fortune, which came out a couple months ago, and much different film than this. That film has a lot more of his fingerprints in terms of the kind of British gangster dramedies, but this one it's an Afghanistan War drama, and really couldn't be much different than most of the films he's made in the past. But I think that really is impressive as it showcases his range as a filmmaker and storyteller, and just the emotions that he can tap into.
I think more people need to watch this film. I truly encourage you to do that. What's your rating for this, Thomas?
Solid A- for The Covenant.
Okay, I'm right there with you. I'm a B+. Wonderful film, well worth watching. Happy I got a chance to check this out.